Could everybody sit down, take a seat? Everybody in the back, please take a seat. All right. Welcome to this CD7 Town Hall. Thank you all for coming. My name is Marcia Marley, President of Blue Wave. I want to start by thanking all of our co-sponsors. So bear with me as I go through them. Action Together, New Jersey. Wynn, you want to stand up? Action Together? There she is. All right. Hunterton County Democratic Committee. Yes. Indivisible, Lambertville, New Hope. Irene and Stephen Lieberman. Yes. LD23 Citron Powell Democrats for New Jersey. Morris County Democratic Committee. Yes. NJEA. Now, New Jersey. Yay, women. Yes. New Jersey Working Families. Come on. Yes. One, New Jersey 7. Somerset County Democratic Committee. Yes. All right, Bridgewater Township Democratic Committee. Hillsborough Democratic Organization. Summit Area Indivisible. Sussex County Democratic Committee. And one more. Warren County Democratic Committee, and I'm going hoarse. I want to start the evening by welcoming to speak to us Councilman Greg Vartan, who was running for this seat at CD7, but suspended his congressional campaign in January, and is here tonight to rally behind Sue Altman. Thank you.
Thank you. You could clap more, that's fine. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm the first speaker, we could do better. Good evening. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so my name is Greg, and I'm a recovering congressional candidate. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for getting the joke. Thank you very much. I should probably run through all the sponsors again, right? No? Okay. Thank you to all the sponsors. Thank you to everyone who is here tonight to take time out of your day, and thank you for giving me a moment to speak. When we were going to do this event last month, it was going to be a mock debate thing, and we were going to have my good friend Joe Signorello, Mayor Joe Signorello, play Tom Kean Jr. And I thought, that's a cool idea, except if you know Joe, like I do, it's a questionable casting choice having a guy who will not stop talking play Tom Kean Jr., who is currently hiding in his basement, right? But in all seriousness, I'm here to talk to you for just a minute about, as both a former candidate and as a local elected official, about what Democrats do all the time, which is we worry. We worry about stuff, right? And we get defensive about things. We worry, oh, what are they going to say about us? What are they going to say about our candidates? And local elected officials, especially, and party leaders, there's chairs here, and there's county chairs here, and there's other local electeds, right? We should justifiably worry, right, about what's happening up ballot and what are the issues and how do those things affect us down ballot, right? Normally, we should really worry about those things, but I'm going to tell you why this year is different. We should not worry about those things. Firstly, because, and I don't think I'm the first one to deliver this news, but if I am, I'm sorry, Republicans are going to lie. They're gonna, yeah, I know. Republicans are gonna lie about stuff. They're gonna misrepresent what candidates have said and done, and they're gonna completely fabricate issues, and they're gonna run on fear, right? Yeah. And locally, right, we have to remember what's happening down ballot is that every single person this year who is running as a Republican has decided to be on the ballot with Trump. They've made that decision. We know already. He's the nominee. They've made that decision. We know these types of Republicans, right? We've had conversations with these types of Republicans who say, well, I'm not that kind of a Republican. I don't think everything Trump says is good. You know, and we know these people who say at the local level, we shouldn't worry about national politics. At the local level, this is about, you know, insert your town here first, right? But you can't say those things. You can't say those things and be taken seriously when you have chosen to be on a ballot with Donald Trump, when you've chosen to be a member of the party of Donald Trump, right? There's no such thing anymore as these folks who say, oh, it's about lower taxes and it's about smaller government and less regulation. No, it's the party of Donald Trump, and they are choosing to be a part of it, and at the local level, they deserve to be asked why, right? So, this is the year, yeah, good clap for that. So I'm really close. So this is the year for Democrats not to worry and not to get defensive. This is the year for Democrats to go on offense, right? And say, we are proud members of the Democratic Party, the party of truth. Yeah, the party of truth, the party of law and order, the party of justice, the party of democracy, and healthcare, and education, and supporting our allies abroad, right? So, that's the attitude that we need to have as we go into this election. And I'm so excited that we have Tom Malinowski here, and we have our next, and we have our next Congresswoman from the 7th Congressional District, Sue Altman is here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to add, we're the party of women. Yes. All right. I'm going to now introduce our interviewer, which is, it's my pleasure. The first time I met Tom was in, I think, late 2017 at some dive restaurant, I don't know, in the middle of New Jersey where we had lunch. And I asked him, tell me why you want to run, which he did for about a half an hour. And then I asked him, how are you going to win in a Republican district? And he convinced me he had a path. Not only did he have a path to win, but with enough money and progressive helping out and getting them out, he's going to win. So that day, I decided, he's our guy. And you did win, and you would have won in 22 with a different redistricted district. But we won't go there. But I want to say that most of the people in this room worked on those campaigns. So you all helped him get elected. We all did. And I think it's so important. It's so important to remember that grassroots has to be there, all right? to win and to win people's hearts and minds, the grassroots have to be with you. And we all were. We were there supporting you, in 18, 20, and 22. And now I'm going to turn, I could tell you all about his career, where he went to college. I'm not going to do that. We have limited time, but you can look it up. It's amazing. And both him and Sue attended Oxford Indian colleges. That's the university, and the colleges are separate. But they both did. And now I'm going to introduce Sue, our next Congresswoman in CD7. Sue has two passions, politics and basketball. She may have more, but she definitely has those. And she won several times in basketball, and she was successful, and I think she's going to win this race with all of our help again. And she needs our help. So Tom and Sue, come on up. Come on. Yes.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Hello. This is amazing. I wish we had congressional tickets. We run together.
So, hello everyone. We were just called up, and but Sue and I were like bantering and throwing spitballs in the back of the class, and we didn't hear right away. So, anyway, gosh, it's so wonderful to see you all, and it's so wonderful to see a turnout like this for our next Congresswoman representing the 7th District, Sue Altman. Let me just say a couple of things, and then we're just going to talk.
Yeah, sounds good.
See where it goes. So Greg talked about Democrats worrying all the time, and we're going to worry forever because there's always something to worry about. But I think one thing that we forget a lot as Democrats in this anxiety-inducing period in American history is that all we have been doing since 2018 is winning.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, 2016 was bad, and then so many of us, as a result of that catastrophe, woke up to the responsibilities of citizenship and a democracy by running for office, in my case, for the first time, getting involved in campaign or running as many other people did in this room, and we won here and across the country in 2018. We won here and across the country in 2020. In 2022, in every battle there are casualties, right? And CD7 was one of them in 22, but we won that election. We've won every special election since then. Every contest that leads up to 2024, we have won. And I am very confident that Joe Biden, certainly the Joe Biden we saw in that State of the Union address a few nights ago, I mean, he's gonna win. And that means we've got to do our part here in CD7. It was made hard for us by the redistricting gods, but it was certainly made into a district the Democrats can and should win, particularly in a presidential year with Trump on the ballot. And it's important for a couple of reasons. When I think it was my last debate with that guy over there. Hi, Tom. He's being just as eloquent right now.
So dynamic.
As he was then. I think I said something like that if he wins this race, we're not going to be hearing a lot from Tom Kean Jr. in Washington, D.C., because he's going to fade into the woodwork just as he did for 20 years in Trenton. But we are going to be hearing a lot from Marjorie Taylor Greene and from Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan. Somehow I didn't mention Johnson. It never really occurred to me that things would get that silly. But the point turned out, unfortunately, right? Sometimes you kick yourself for being right. We were right. And so we have this House of Representatives that could not be a greater contrast to the House of Representatives that we helped elect in 2020 with all that it did for the country. And this House, to call it a do-nothing Congress would be an insult to do-nothing Congresses. And some of it, like, we can tolerate because Biden's president, and we did so much in my Congress that, like, just implementing that stuff is great. But you always see me with this American and Ukrainian flag on my lapel. There are people dying in Ukraine because of these bozos. Total inability and capacity to govern, to do anything. And so even if Sue weren't a wonderful person, we would desperately need to flip this seat and get back to a sane majority in the House of Representatives. But then the second and final thing I'll say is I have gotten to know Sue, not just in the last few months when she's been running, but well before that. We were partners in my last campaign. And, we'll talk about politics in our conversation, but I just want to start with the most important thing, and that is that she is going to be a fantastic member of Congress. And I wouldn't say that about everybody, including everyone I might support or vote for, right? And I know all the members of Congress. She will absolutely stand out because she's got that combination of public charisma that enables her to do the persuasion that is so important as a member of Congress, and she is an incredibly smart and serious person who will be a tremendous legislator. Somebody who will make you proud.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
We just have to take a few steps to get you there.
Yeah.
Right? And
a good
so
pivot.
with that build-up,
Yes, Tom.
you sure you want to be in Congress?
Yes, I am. Positive.
Positive?
Yes.
Okay. Before we talk about of course I started already with the Congress stuff, but I want folks to learn a little bit more about you.
Sure.
We kind of know, you always know the bare bones of the campaign bio. You grew up in Hunterdon County playing basketball for Voorhees High, is that?
I did. Yep.
Right?
North Hunterdon Voorhees. Do we have any Vikings or Lions in the house? Okay.
Right, there we go.
Love it.
But tell me, tell me about the political awakening. Like, at what point in this story did you start thinking, I want to do something like this with my life, and why?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that was entirely made up of Republicans. And to this day, both of my parents are Republicans. So it's given me a lot of practice talking across the aisle, storming out of the room angrily, throwing things. But I've gotten good at having a conversation with Republicans because so many of them are in my family. So I was actually pretty apolitical all the way through up until when I graduated Columbia. I went and played basketball overseas and wasn't thinking a lot about politics, although at the time George W. Bush was president. And I remember having multiple conversations with cab drivers in multiple countries asking me why on earth we chose him as our president and not having a good answer. But that sort of became something I realized as an American abroad you had to account for. So when I was teaching at Blair Academy, which is a fancy prep school. I wanted to be a public school teacher, but with my basketball schedule as an undergraduate, I couldn't fit in all the credits you needed to be a public school teacher. So I went to a fancy prep school where you don't need accreditation to teach. And at the time, Chris Christie was governor. And I know, Mr. 2% approval rating. And he was doing things to public school teachers. Do we have any teachers in the room? Any folks in education? Oh, incredible, thank you. So I don't have to tell you the type of brutal rudeness and nastiness he displayed towards all public sector employees, but especially I was sensitive to the type of rhetoric he had against teachers and educators. At the same time, he sent his own kids to a school, it wasn't Blair, but it was another school similar to Blair in New Jersey. And I remember thinking teaching is really hard, and I had like the best situation possible. Small class sizes, beautiful grounds, all the resources you could dream of, total autonomy, didn't have to teach to the test, and I came home exhausted every single day and couldn't wait for the weekend and couldn't wait for the next break. So to hear him speak so ill of teachers and schools drove me crazy. And I realized, because I had studied, after that I studied in Oxford in England and studied international comparative education, and I realized not only was he attacking teachers and schools, which had the probably obvious problem of undermining the education system that I had so wonderfully benefited from, and so many of us have children or ourselves benefited from, but he was, in my opinion, undermining the essence of what it meant to have an American education, which is that we treat our students holistically, we teach critical thinking, we ask questions, we want people to write essays, we want people to speak out when they see something wrong, we want them to run for class president, we want them to start clubs and play sports and music. And so I thought that was a pretty un-American thing that he was doing. So when I got back home, I ended up in Camden, New Jersey, and in Camden, under Christie's leadership, they were closing schools and cutting school budgets. And it was an awful situation for the neediest of New Jersey's students. And New Jersey has a wonderful education system, and I would fight tooth and nail to make sure that the students today, in many ways, have the same education that I had. But if New Jersey's education system has one Achilles heel, it's that we have great racial and economic disparity and great school segregation. Still to this day, it persists. And I was at a town hall, and to Christie's credit, unlike this guy, Chris Christie actually had town halls. It was part of his shtick, right? Do you remember those years? He would come in, he'd have a lot of swagger, he'd have the town hall, he'd engage in banter with residents, and say what you will about Christie, I give him a lot of credit for coming out in public a lot, and he did it even when he was running briefly for president. So I attended one of those town halls, and I was angry because he was so nasty to the Camden schools and he was cutting Camden school programs. And I dressed up, and I went with a couple of friends. We all dressed up in our fanciest Republican outfits. I borrowed some jewelry from my mother. I went in, I had my hair all did. I went in, I sat right in the front row, and it was actually a reserved seat. So they have these reserved seats, like here, Chairwoman Schaefer's here in a reserved seat because she's a VIP. And I sat in one of those. And I thought maybe the person won't come. And the person didn't come. So I got to sit in some mayor's seat. And so it came to Q&A, and I asked a question about Camden schools. And he called on me, and I wasn't sure he would call on me, but I looked Republican enough that he called on me. So he called on me, and I asked a question about Camden schools, and he was taken aback because he was like, uh-oh, she's not a Republican mayor. This isn't a safe question. This was a bad one. He looks around, and he starts to answer the question, and he lies. He says something that's not true, and I had read up on the topic, and I knew my stuff, and I was angry for the people of Camden. And I said, excuse me, Governor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what you just said there is wrong. And he got very flustered, and we went back and forth, and he's about this distance, Chairwoman Schaefer and I, and he goes, well, do you want the microphone? And he didn't know I was a former professional basketball player with lightning quick reflexes. So before I could say anything, he took the microphone, I'm not gonna throw it, he took it and he whipped it at me, and I caught it. And proceeded to use it to completely decimate the lie he had told about Camden schools and to tell him why he was wrong. And the press corps was there, and it was all on video. And when I was done, I politely tossed it back to him, and that was my political awakening in New Jersey politics. And I never looked back. I was hooked. I should have. I was trying to be nice. I was trying to, they go low, we go high. I was doing that.
So passing the mic, basketball skills. Do only point guards run for office, or do other? There's something to that, right?
There is. We're very bossy.
You want to like.
I was a 1 and a 2 because I like to score too.
You like to,
so
okay.
I sometimes brought it up, and I sometimes was the scorer. So
all right.
I could do both.
That's good. By the way, Blair, my stepfather who raised me, reason I was able to come to America, his name was Blair Clark, and his great-great-great-grandfather founded Blair Academy.
No kidding.
In Blairstown.
Inslee Blair, I believe.
Inslee Blair.
Yes.
He was not the nicest man in the world, I don't think.
No, I think he was a train baron, one of those
yes,
railroad
he was
barons.
a robber baron.
Robber
railroad.
yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da. But anyway, our paths crossed.
About that, all these moments.
So, look, I want to, you talk about activism, Camden County and standing up to Christie, but I think, you haven't just stood up to Republicans in the state of New Jersey through your activism. And fighting corruption is a central theme of your campaign. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And how it plays into the politics of CD7.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I have fought both parties. So the other sort of moment, another famous sort of Jersey famous moment I had was there was a tax incentive, again in Camden. I lived in Camden for 7 years. There was a tax incentive scandal in Camden where, in my opinion, all of us, New Jersey's great taxpayers, who pay a lot in taxes, got fleeced to the tune of $1 billion over a tax incentive bill that was supposed to ostensibly help the people of Camden. And in my opinion, it was a set of political giveaways to very politically connected corporations centered around one particular Democratic party boss. And the group in Camden who fought gallantly against it because they wanted jobs and they wanted those investments to go to small businesses and community organizations and the types of things that actually build communities from the ground up, not sort of the trickle-down Reagan economics that this entire thing was sort of predicated on. We fought for many years, and the people in Camden continue to be extremely brave. I mean, they fought Democrats before it was a thing anyone did. In the complete darkness of a place where there was no accountability, no way to vote people out, almost no press coverage, and certainly for a group of particularly women, many of whom were women of color, really no voice and no platform, completely egregiously. And so all the credit goes to the folks there who fought very, very hard. But we found ourselves at a moment where the New Jersey State Senate was having a hearing on these very tax incentive bills. And a bunch of us, probably about 100 of us, decided to go. It was a public hearing. And I had helped organize some people to go, but again, the people of Camden wanted accountability for what had gone on. And the person presiding over the meeting, a senator, a Democratic senator, pointed to the people in the back who were making some noise. But the state troopers came over to me and beelined to me and dragged me out of the hearing. And it was kind of a scary moment because I had never been dragged out by multiple. It took 4 of them. 4 of them. And these were not small men. You can watch the film online. I mean, these are some large chaps in state troopers. And I wasn't resistant, but I didn't go along. So I did the thing, I went limp thing. And they literally had to drag me out of the hearing. And that moment, actually, while it was really frightening at the time, and the most poignant part of it, because it's all a little bit of a blur, it was very frightening. I had that sort of fight or flight feeling, was when I got outside, I had a dress on with short sleeves. They shut the door, and I was outside, and it was freezing. It was like November, and it was sleeting, and all I had was I had sandals on, and I was standing outside completely freezing. And the police officer came out, and I said, could you at least grab my coat for me? And he went back out and got it. And I said, look, you don't know this now, to the cop, and I don't know his name to this day. I said, you don't know this now, but you and I are on the same team against them. And he looked at me, he was freaked out too, of what just all happened. But it really occurred to me at that point in time, and that became a really interesting turning point because it brought attention to an issue and a scandal that is now under federal FBI investigation, is now under state investigation, and I believe I just read this week that investigation's widening. And I think it also points to the fact that even in New Jersey, or especially in New Jersey perhaps, the Democratic Party can sometimes have issues with corruption. And, you know, if I'm the one to break this to you, there's a couple of books I'll recommend. And I think, you know, this year, all joking aside, like the situation with Bob Menendez, Senator Menendez, I think has brought this into great relief. And when I was at the helm of Working Families, we did a lot of anti-corruption work. One of the big things we did, and one of the big things we fought for, which still to this day gets me in hot water, was the first initial line lawsuit, which was the lawsuit we assembled with a group of plaintiffs to try to get rid of the county ballot line. And this was long before anyone in this room ever knew what it was. And I give a lot of shout outs. I see Antoinette Miles over there. But to the candidates who first ran off the line, I mean, it was a really frightening experience for folks. And I go back to Camden, people ran for things like mayor, town council off the line. And it was, you know, a really frightening experience for people. They were really sticking their necks out there. And so, you know, I'm pleased to see a robust discussion about some of the structures in New Jersey politics that have been in positions for a very long time. I know the U.S. Senate race is something we're all kind of obsessed with at the moment, right? Can't take our eyes off of it. But that race will come and go, and that primary will come and go. And I know there's a hearing on Monday where the line lawsuit is being, you know, heard in court, and that's very exciting, and it has great ramifications for the state. But this CD7 race will continue to be a real focal point for, I think, CD7, because we have to flip the House back. And I think we can hold, yes. We can hold two thoughts at once. We can both think our party can be better and stronger and wiser and smarter and a little better here in New Jersey in some places, and each county party is different, and I'm not going to get into all that, but that as a whole, we as Democrats can be better, and also know that at a national level, we can't fool around. We have to get Joe Biden reelected. We have to flip the House, and both of those things are exactly true at the same time. And we have to be sophisticated enough and savvy enough and passionate enough about the trade-offs that democracy requires of us to have those two things exist in our minds together. Winning is better than not winning. Democrats, in my opinion, are better than Republicans, even when they're not always perfect, and that's okay.
Well said. You know, the reason I ask that is that this is a district that is, you know, it's shifted back and forth a little bit over the years, obviously, but it's basically 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, and 1/3 uncommitted independent. And you can't win with just Democrats. You obviously can't win with just Republicans. You have to get those people who are in between for whatever reason. And one of the most unifying issues for people across party lines in America, and certainly New Jersey, is opposition to perceptions of abuse of power and corruption. And they're going to come after you for good, you know, for some of the stuff you did, because this is rough business.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure everybody knows that what Sue was doing was standing up for a principle that actually is embraced by people across the party division in New Jersey.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Against, you know, holding people accountable, whichever party they belong to, if they weren't living up to the highest standards that we all have for our public officials. So we need to help get that message out.
Yeah, I would say that. So now I've, you know, been in this race 8 or so months, and I've talked to a lot of different people. And having grown up in Hunterdon County, mostly a red area, a lot of unaffiliated friends, or, you know, friends of parents of friends. I will say I've been delighted to see the amount of credibility that being able to point to very, very visceral examples of times where we've stood up to both parties really does lend itself a lot of credibility. Because in general, I mean, we in this room feel really strongly about the Democratic Party in a positive way, even if we love it despite its faults. And across the district and across the country, people are increasingly becoming skeptical of Congress, becoming skeptical of the two-party system, of institutions in general. And that's a scary place for us to be. But I do think that the story, to the congressman's point, the story of being able to say, look, no matter what, and this is true, I'm going to stand up for New Jerseyans. I'm going to stand up for the people of this district. And no matter what, I will do what's right, even in the face of pressure by my own party. That goes a long way, and I've been very pleased to see that people are absorbing that message. And the contrast to Tom Kean is very sharp. I mean, he is a lifelong politician. You know the greatest hits. He's a lifelong politician. Father was a governor, and what a great governor he was, but the son is not like the father. And he hosted, as many of you know, because I think I saw some familiar faces at the rally that day, he hosted Mike Johnson, that awful speaker, here in our district to fundraise at the same time he doesn't hold town halls or make public appearances himself. So to me, that is exactly the same type of corruption that we are all fighting against. You're not listening to the people, you're not responsive or moderating your points of view to fit the values of this district. You're listening to Mike Johnson, who's way out of step with our district, against gay marriage, against women having abortions, questionable on contraception, for crying out loud, who responds. Mike Johnson reports directly to Donald Trump. So Tom Kean Jr. is getting his marching orders directly through Mike Johnson via Donald Trump, and that's a real problem. And I think when we tell this story on those terms, it paints a very good picture for us, and I think a very dangerous picture for Tom Kean, because he won't speak out against anything, and he's like a jellyfish. Floating in the ocean.
No, I'm sorry. Sue and I don't agree on everything. I think the jellyfish is a beautiful creature, actually.
One of those clear ones, the ones that don't sting.
Have you seen those things? Like in aquariums? They're extraordinary creatures. But let's talk about this guy a little bit. Something that's really been troubling me about our congressman, quote unquote. Very few people notice this because few people notice anything about him, but when he was elected, quite remarkably, they made him the chairman of the Europe subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I would have, had I been reelected, I probably would have had a subcommittee chairmanship on that committee in my third term, but despite my experience in foreign affairs, there was no way I was going to get a subcommittee chairmanship in my freshman year because there were too many Democrats who were senior who were very interested in that stuff. But apparently none of the Republicans wanted the subcommittee that was going to be in charge of Russia and Ukraine. I wonder why. And so they gave it to Tom. And you could say, I try to be fair to his credit, that his official position on Ukraine is that he wants the United States to help Ukraine. If you call his office, that's what they'll tell you. But here we are, the House of Representatives has been tied in knots on this issue now for months, with extraordinarily damaging consequences. Basically, because of the House of Representatives, Putin and Russia, two of our greatest adversaries in the world, might win a war. There are people dying. And I have seen no evidence whatsoever that this guy, who's supposed to be, in a way, the senior most Republican on Europe issues, on Ukraine issues in the House, that he has uttered a single word about it. Has he gone on television to say, even politely, Speaker Johnson should put this on the floor? Other Republicans have. Has he had a committee hearing in the subcommittee? No, not recently. Has he put anything on social media? Is there any evidence that he has spoken up in the private caucus meetings of the Republican Party? It would leak if he had. And I happen to know he hasn't. I've been doing a lot of work on the Hill with colleagues on both sides of the aisle advocating for Ukraine aid. And I can tell you, the name Tom Kean does not come up, because everyone understands, members, staff, including on the Republican side, that he's not really there. And this is the part that offends me. You know, if he were to stand up in front of us and say, look, I have a deep personal conviction that life begins at conception, and I'm going to defend that by pursuing a national abortion ban, I would fight like hell against him. I would disagree with him, but in a way I would respect him for having a conviction and fighting for it. On this, he's supposed to have the right conviction. I'd certainly respect him if, like other moderate Republicans, he was actually willing to stand up and fight for it. Fight for something. Do something. My sense, and I want to get yours, obviously, my sense is that the seat is vacant. I think the governor should hold a special election to fill this vacant seat. Because you know, but it's also, and here is the tough, it is actually sometimes hard it's hard to run against nobody. And if I were his handlers, I would give him the same advice they give him, which is don't be seen, because it doesn't help him, right, when he does speak up. And this was my challenge, like, how do you run against nobody? And so talk a little bit about the challenge of running against somebody like that.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I think there's a couple things that come to mind. One is that, unfortunately, well, you were the incumbent, so he was just a candidate running when he was invisible the last time around. And that can be a campaign strategy, and to your point, like, I would also advise him that, because he is not, I mean, can you imagine him on this floor if he actually showed up to a debate tonight and we had a full debate? I mean, we as Democrats would eviscerate him with our common sense and our points and his lack of record. But if you are gonna have been elected to Congress, it is the honor of a lifetime to represent your district. It is an absolute honor. What a wonderful privilege. And to think you would have been elected and you'd be serving to the country, this beautiful district with smart, sophisticated voters and savvy people with incredible backgrounds and diversity, and you don't even show up for a hearing, or you don't even have meetings, or you aren't in public. That is no longer a campaign strategy. That is disrespectful to every single resident of this district across party lines. It's disrespectful. And it's a complete dereliction of duty. And these people in this district, when people come and live in CD7, they're hardworking. They expect a certain amount of experience and service out of the people who represent them. And they deserve that. Everyone does. And he is not doing his job. So to go back to the other point about how do we talk to unaffiliated voters, how do we talk to maybe moderate Republicans who feel the Republican Party's gone off the rails, when we talk about how he hasn't done his job, that really resonates, because we have the least effective Congress in the history of this country, and quite possibly, as the congressman pointed out, the least effective congressman in the least effective Congress.
That's good.
So there has to be some accountability for that. And the other thing that I think brings me great hope, and events like tonight, I think, prove this point, is that when you have someone who creates a vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum, and the movement abhors a vacuum. We're bringing on an organizing director in the next few weeks, and one of the things I promise is that if this man is not going to fill the space with ideas or even his mere presence, then this movement will fill that space, and we will fill it with ideas and a presence. And we will reach out to every nook and cranny of this district. It is a big district geographically, right? It's coast to coast now. Delaware River to the Rahway Strait, or whatever that's called.
Well, it's an oil refinery.
The kill of Staten Island, whatever that stretch of water is.
That's right.
So it's a big district. We have a rural section, we have a suburban section, and we have a more urban section. And each of them require a different touch. Each of them require a different style, a different conversation, a different sort of set of organizing skills. So to me, as an organizer by trade and as an organizer by personality, I see this as a wonderful opportunity because there are areas that Democrats have not been able to penetrate yet in this state. There are people, the types of which Democratic Party writ large has not been able to connect to. So we have an incredible opportunity. And I can't do it by myself, and we can't do it ourselves, but together we can find ways to talk to every single voter in this district because he won't be anywhere to be found. So for me, I love it. Because what a contrast we will paint this spring and this summer into the next fall.
Yep. Plus, there will be about 100,000, at least 100,000 more people voting.
Yes, there will be. The electorate will be much bigger.
Than in 2022, sadly, right, that we get depressed turnout in the midterms.
That's true.
So that's what makes this a really tantalizing opportunity.
It's true.
And I don't want to raise people's expectation too much because it's not like all those people are naturally Democrats. They're not. But they're people who will engage in a very different way and be, I think, reachable.
Yes.
If the message transcends partisanship.
Yep.
And I love your line about not doing his job. It's a very simple message, but it's absolutely true and demonstrable. He's got a voting record now, too, which he didn't before.
And some really bad ones in there, and I think many of you have seen them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on. So I do think, and I can tell you, the folks in Washington I speak to who just ruthlessly evaluate campaigns because they want to win a majority. They don't care about the individual candidates as much as winning the majority. CD7 is on every private list. You know about the public list, but it's on every private list of the top 20 districts in the country right now, where the battle for the House is going to be waged by the Democratic Party, and we just have to be the army that gets deployed. How are we doing on audience questions? Okay. So I think we have a couple of people who I'm going to call on first, and then we want to open it up to everybody else. And the first person, if you all are ready, is Chris Estevez.
Oh, Chris.
Where's Chris?
Actually, Chris said he had to step out for a quick minute.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, well.
On to the next.
I can ask for it. Thank you. Is there a microphone?
All right, this is a question on behalf of Chris Estevez of CWA. So since the early 1980s, the overall rate of unionization has declined in half. That decline creates problems for all workers. Union members consistently earn more than their non-union counterparts, but research by the Economic Policy Institute shows that higher union density increases wages for all workers. Weak laws protecting workers' rights to organize and negotiate for better wages and standards have played a major role in increasing inequity and decreasing wages for average workers. Do you support the Protecting the Right to Organize Act?
Yeah.
PRO Act.
Yes. So as the State Director of Working Families, I had a lot of opportunity to work very closely with labor unions in New Jersey. And thank God New Jersey has some pretty good labor laws, and we have really strong labor unions. And Chris Estevez was on our board at Working Families. He's the political director, for those of you who don't know him, of the Communication Workers of America, CWA. And awesome. And also a constituent, indeed. And yeah, our campaign so far has gotten the endorsement of several labor unions, and I expect to hopefully continue to get more. To me, if this question is about democracy, if the sort of question of the hour of this moment of this cycle is about democracy, I see workplace organizing and labor unions as incredibly important institutions, both on the left, but particularly in the Democratic Party, as nodes for organizing. And organizing, to me, is the best way to build countervailing power, the best way to pull power back to the people. And labor unions have been decimated. There's no surprise why the right wing is going after labor unions through laws and other means at the state level, because they know that these are the institutions through which people organize, through which people demand better wages and better life, better health care. and they know that the Democratic Party relies on these institutions. And so keeping them strong is absolutely not just a strategic imperative, it is a moral imperative, because workers right now are not making enough money in general. The cost of living is far too high. I could go on about housing and groceries and all the things that we all know viscerally are too expensive. And the least we can do as a country is strengthen the labor union and the movement to strengthen the labor unions, because our democracy depends on it as well as our economy.
I'm going to go to Susan Bluebow next.
I feel like you should win a prize or something. Where is she? Oh, there she is, right there.
And this is great, great staff work. I actually have your last name phonetically spelled, as if I need it.
No, nobody gets it right. So, hello, future Congresswomen.
Hello, Susan.
And I'm going to read from my notes because I'm not a good public speaker, but I just want to ask a question related to abortion, the abortion issue, since that's such a powerful motivator and is helping us win elections. Am I doing this right?
You're great.
Okay, so since the Dobbs decision 2 years ago, many states have outlawed abortion. And I know that New Jersey is one of only a handful of states that allows the procedure at any stage of pregnancy. But I also understand that this could evaporate if Congress passes a national ban and it's signed into law. I know Tom Kean Jr. would vote for that national ban. So some states are now coming for many other rights that we've taken for granted, like IVF treatments, mifepristone, and same-sex marriage. So, since the Supreme Court justices are given lifetime appointments, and this court has a far-right majority hostile to individual rights as long as you exclude the Second Amendment, can you talk a little bit about how you might address this dilemma if you're in Congress?
Yeah, so thank you, Susan. Well said. I cannot believe it's 2024. And in my platform, as a woman candidate, I have to say that one of the things I stand for, because my opponent doesn't, is women's rights. I can't believe it. Every time it leaves my mouth, I cannot believe it. And I was at an event not too long ago in Princeton, I think, and a bunch of the moms who hosted the event brought their daughters, and they had just come from like soccer practice, so they had like their little uniforms on, and their like little shin guards were still on, socks rolled down, and they all sat like cross-legged in the front. And this question, a similar version of this question came up, you know, Roe versus Wade, reproductive rights. And I actually got choked up, because it occurred to me that it's quite possible that when I was 12 years old, when I was their age, we will have hit the high watermark of women's rights in my lifetime. And I think about all the women in here, Democratic Party leaders, grassroots leaders, people who fought hard in your careers, and think that the only reason I even had the idyllic opportunity to play college sports and to run for office and to run an organization and to go to all these wonderful schools is because you all fought generations worth of sweat, blood, and tears and crying and screaming into your pillows for the rights for women to have equal rights in all the ways. And so your question's a little bit of a technical one. How do we fight this? And what I can tell you is that when I'm in Congress, and prior to me being a candidate, when I was at New Jersey Working Families, there was a coalition working on reproductive rights. There were marches we put together. Blue Wave, in fact, hosted one the day after Roe was overturned. I will fight with every breath in my body for the rights of women to control when they have children, if they have children, if they want to stay home with their kids, if they want to go to work, if they want to be working moms, any combination. Because generations of women have fought too hard to even think of a future where this life could be taken away from us. And yet, it is evident that there are people on the right who want to take those rights away from us. And it makes me furious. So you will see me fight like hell for these rights every day until I die. Thank you.
Hi, Sue. How you doing? If elected, what will you do to help out with the New Jersey Transit proposal? I know they have new, they want to charge commuters more money for the fares, for New Jersey Transit, for buses and for trains. How, if elected, how would you come around that so the commuters that travel every day don't have to pay more to get to work each day?
Remind me your name again?
My name is David.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that question. So Tom Kean Jr. has voted, when he was in the state Senate, he voted against New Jersey Transit funding over and over again. So it makes me really frustrated. Doesn't it make you frustrated that he's up there talking about like Gateway, like he had something to do with it?
Is he talking?
No. Tweeting.
No, that's great. He's
Tweeting.
talking. Wow. No, he obviously had nothing. No, he actually, he did pop up once, I think, 10 or 12 years ago to praise Chris Christie for canceling the ARC tunnel, which would be ready today.
Yep.
Right, had that decision not been made. And he hasn't been really heard from since.
No, as per usual.
Yeah.
So New Jersey Transit has been sorely underfunded for a really long time. It is, to me, one of the great travesties. I'm delighted the Gateway Tunnel is finally happening, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. It is egregiously frustrating that folks in this district, because we have a lot of folks along the Raritan Valley line, other lines that commute into work every day, into New York or Newark. It's ridiculous that we don't have more one-seat rides. It's ridiculous that you can't count on New Jersey Transit coming when it says they're going to come. I had to go into the city not too long ago, and this was a one-off. This was a one-off. I don't have to do it every day. I'm not grinding it out every day. And when I got there, there were like a 20-minute delay. And I was like, oh, this is really frustrating. I cannot imagine. And by the time the day was done, after I'd gone into the city and taken the subway and got to my meeting and come back, I was exhausted. And to think people do that every freaking day. It's ridiculous. New Jersey is between two major cities. We should be the best on earth at moving people around. And if we can't figure this out, Lord help us, because it is an intersection of people's mental health, people's livelihoods, property values, and the environment. There is literally no downside to investing in transportation. So no, the answer is not taking more money from the poor, suffering commuter. The answer is serious and long-term investments in the transportation fund and committing to those in a bipartisan manner as a matter of principle, and getting federal funding when you can. And if I am in Congress, I will fight for it. I know you did. And making sure that the state puts money in, because it is a state obligation, but it also should not have to be sustainable. It is a public good. So we need to invest in it like it is a public good.
Hear, hear.
That's how I feel about that.
And just very quickly, in my last term in Congress, as you all know, we delivered more funding for New Jersey public transportation than any Congress since the 16th century. And so if I were still there, I absolutely would not support a fare hike. I'd be pretty outraged by it. Yeah. Use the damn money that we gave you to make the investments that are needed. And, you know, sometimes members of Congress can get into some of our internal Jersey debates when we have been as generous as we were, at least in that Congress. Dan Zielinski has a question. Where's Dan?
Birthday's coming up on April 23rd. I think it's a shame that it's just one day a year. And we talk about climate change, and we talk about that in a broad way, like for the whole planet. But right here in New Jersey, and specifically in Bridgewater, as we are experiencing these torrential downpours that go back even before Ida, this kind of climate change is really touching each one of us. If it's not in our backyard, it very well may be in our basement, or maybe even on the first floor. And so my question to you is, how do you intend on addressing this issue that's so specific for New Jersey, as we have water that funnels through our environment to the ocean and is now reaching like biblical proportions.
Yep.
In Ida, we lost a mother trying to keep pace with her daughter who was drowned by Ida.
Oh my God.
So this is a real issue that's not as vague to some folks as climate change for the planet. It's like literally right in our backyard.
Yep, it's so true. So I have an answer, but actually, if you want to talk a little bit, because you were there in Congress, of the ways in which the president's package was a big investment in clean energy.
Well, yeah, the biggest we've ever made.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's sufficient. We're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, strangely named. It was a climate bill more than anything else. It was a bill to protect, to make sure we're not killed by bad weather, to put it in very blunt terms. And when Ida hit, my basement was flooded. My house, which dates from the 18th century, had never been flooded in its history until Ida. And so I was dealing with FEMA. I had thousands of constituents, many people in this room who are dealing with FEMA. Frustrating process. I'm glad it's there to at least help people with the cleanup. But what that was more than anything was a wake-up call that we have to deal with this, with the reality, not just the potential of catastrophic climate change and what it's doing right now to our homes and families. The bill, it absolutely will accelerate our country's transition to a clean energy future and give us the credibility and the leverage to demand the same thing of China and India and other countries around the world that also need to act. And we have a president now who's willing to use that leverage, willing to use that megaphone, now that the United States has set a strong example. That's the good news. The bad news is that if, God forbid, the Republicans take or keep the House, take the Senate, God forbid even more, Donald Trump wins the presidency, they have said very, very clearly that their first target will be this clean energy law. For some reason, they seem to want China, not the United States, to lead the world into that clean energy future. I'm a patriot. I want America to lead the way, and I care about this community, and I want our families protected. And so one reason we've got to elect Sue and flip the House of Representatives and get her voice there is to make sure that we build on that historic piece of legislation rather than lose it in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I will say that one of the most, we talked about before, the bipartisan sort of interesting little ways to be bipartisan in this district. I think you recognize this as well. People move to this part of the district because many of them, and this is across party lines, care about the environment. They like the natural world. They want to be around nature. They instinctively care about the earth. And people, so Lambertville, where I live, I know Bridgewater in this part of the state, obviously, as you move out east, flooding is a major issue. But when you go out west to where Hunterdon, Warren, Sussex counties, there are different ways in which climate change has affected people out there too. And it's not maybe as much the flooding in their basement the same way. It could be they're farmers and they've lost a big investment in topsoil because that's flooded away. It could be farmers who can no longer grow the type of apples that they used to grow or have to move their cattle in and out on a different schedule, and that affects their bottom line. So there are definitely ways in which we can talk about climate change. And in a room full of Democrats, talking about climate change as climate change, I think is great because we all know what we mean and what we care about. But when I go around the district, it's been very interesting to hear people's concerns about the weather and about the environment without using the words climate change because they feel like it's so hyper-partisan. I don't agree with that, but I think that is a perception that people in this district have. And so obviously I care a great deal about the environment. It was something, the Green New Deal, which is what it was sort of the predecessor to the IRA, was something I advocated for as an advocate in my former job. So this is a non-negotiable for me for both the reasons of the economy and America's leadership in the world, but also it's the right thing to do. We had a youth roundtable in the summer, and this is the top issue of young people. They are concerned about the economy, understandably so, and they're concerned about the terrible environmental conditions that they will be inheriting for the next generation and their children's generation. And so it is completely something that I'm going to focus on as elected in Congress.
Darcy Drago. Darcy.
Last year, Tom Kean was touting his support for the Secure Border Act of 2023, which would have forced the Biden administration to restart construction of a border wall, to increase the number of Border Patrol agents and provide bonus pay to those agents, but it would also reinstate a Remain in Mexico policy that would have caused asylum seekers to be sent back to Mexico during immigration proceedings. This year, Kean has been spouting MAGA talking points because he's had to defend his vote to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and accused him of failing to halt the flow of immigrants across the U.S. border with Mexico. Tom Kean has also spent time fear-mongering, linking immigrants to crime here in New Jersey. Given the emotion and misinformation around immigration issues, how would you talk to CD7 residents about this, and what would you do in Congress to break the deadlock on immigration policy?
So I think one of the worst, most cynical things to have happened in the last couple of years is what they did with that border bill. They had something that was, in my opinion, didn't go as far as it should have, but I was happy it was a step forward. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and the fact that the Senate actually could produce something that was agreeable to a number of senators, and then the House killed it. Because, as we find out, Donald Trump wants to be able to beam, he wants to be able to run on it. He wants to be able to beam pictures of the border into everybody's homes on Fox News 24/7 all summer long into November. And that's why they killed the border bill. So it is an extremely cynical thing that I think is backfiring. As I've gone around the district, people want to hear that Congress is providing solutions, and the fact that they did this on purpose in a cynical political ploy that they plan on then running on is really a bridge too far for a lot of people. So I believe in a pathway to citizenship. I think that's important, but I also philosophically believe that immigrants are really important in the fabric of this country. We cannot obviously let everybody in. There can't be an open border. And we need to invest in resources to have a process that works and is sustainable and manageable. But that is very doable, and our country can handle that. And the idea that the Republicans have squashed a bill that would take a step in that direction is, to me, a complete problem.
It was a travesty. They're saying for months that the border is the #1 crisis facing this country, that America's being invaded. I hate that rhetoric, by the way. It's despicable.
It's terrible.
But if you're going to say that, and then you negotiate what was probably the most conservative, bipartisan but conservative border bill that we have seen in decades in front of the Congress, and then you explicitly refuse to vote on it because, as you say, the leader of your party then suddenly turns around and say, okay, I know I said it was an urgent crisis, but I don't want you to do a damn thing about it because I want to run on the problem rather than allowing America to see a solution. Like, you got to be pretty far gone politically to support people who do that. And look, that it is a profoundly complicated problem in politics, and elections are not great times to talk about complexity. We've all experienced that. We've got 8 million job openings in the United States that probably can only be filled by legal immigration, and I want it to be legal immigration. And one of the good things in that very conservative compromise was that it would have allowed for an increase in legal immigration. Much of the stuff, the draconian stuff that these guys want, doesn't work. It's not just wrong, it doesn't work. Remain in Mexico just means you send people, asylum seekers, back across the border so that they can try to cross again and again and again and again and again, which means the Border Patrol, instead of dealing with fentanyl, dealing with crime, dealing with things that are actually threatening to us, just have to catch the same people again and again and again and again. And so the Biden administration with moderate Republicans is trying to find a rational way of dealing with this massive demand to come to the United States in a way that's in keeping with our obligation to protect the country and our laws. Final thing about this look, we have to respect the very normal, legitimate desire of most Americans to have security at the border. But at the same time, remember that one of the comparative advantages that America has over every one of our adversaries is that everyone wants to come to America and no one wants to come to Russia. No one wants to come to China, okay? It doesn't mean we let everybody in, but this is a good thing that people want to come here, and we do need people to do the things with us as Americans, as new Americans, that need to be done to build this country and to make us strong. And so never forget that, and I think that's a message that also can be delivered even in the most conservative parts of this country to people who are still patriotic. The last planned question is from Guy Citron, and I'm willing to keep people here as long as they're willing to stay, and someone's going to look at me angrily, but I don't care. Guy, go. Yeah, if you've run for office, you don't need a mic.
Okay, I got one just in case. Is it on? No? I don't need a mic. First, I just want to say, Sue, thank you for running.
Thank you, Guy, for running. Thank you.
And Tom, thank you for sticking around and doing all the hard, public service work that we all love and respect for. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Sue, I just have one concise question for you. I've been volunteering at a local food bank for the past little while, and I've noticed that food insecurity is an issue in our district. So my question is, do you believe Congress should prioritize increasing support for families in need rather than cutting funding for essential programs like SNAP and WIC, which our country club Republican friend is very into, especially considering the rising food insecurity and corporate greed affecting grocery prices?
Oh my gosh, this irritates me so much. This man has never wanted a day in his life. I doubt, he is so privileged that I doubt he's ever stepped foot in a grocery store, let alone can tell you how much a box of cereal or toilet paper costs or milk or eggs or anything else, because I'm sure he has people who handle that. I'm sure he is not wheeling a shopping cart through ShopRite. So it's silver spoon, fork, and knife. And the depravity of being someone who voted against Meals on Wheels, which is something my own grandmother used until her death, voted against the child tax credit, and to your point, all of the other programs we use to make sure people can make ends meet at a time when the economy with inflation and the price of housing and the price of groceries, all of that is squeezing people's paychecks to the point where they're really having to cut back on food. And Guy, to your point, they're lining up at food banks. We hear from food banks who need more food than ever. Things like pet food, things like toilet paper, baby food. It is disgusting that a man who's never had to suffer or work or sweat or toil to make ends meet can make these decisions for us. There are families in this district who are suffering, and when I am there, I am going to fight for these things to make people's lives easier, not this disgusting, punitive kind of, let them eat cake, country club nonsense that Tom Kean Jr. is unfortunately espousing on behalf of this district.
He did shoot a commercial in a grocery store once.
Oh, the photoshopped one. I forgot about that.
But then they used stock footage of grocery shelves from like California. Whoops.
I forgot about that. That was awful.
Let's go back there.
This is not a planned question.
No more planned questions.
No, it's not a planned question. And Tom just said that election is not a time for complexity issue. Unfortunately, I have a burning complex question here.
Bring it on.
And
I think we got it.
I think communication is a key. So Guy and I here, my husband and I here, we raised 3 intelligent Jewish daughters. They are all adults. They are young. They are bright, intelligent. And we cannot hold any conversation about the Gaza war with them, because no matter how I say Hamas is a terrorist organization, they say they think Biden administration, by funding Israeli, is funding terrorists. Okay. But in the same time, we cannot hold conversation with our Jewish friends who have strong tie with Israel, because anything we criticize about Israel will be labeled anti-Semitism. What is your position, and how is your communication strategy so that we can motivate all of them to come out to vote, because we need all of them to participate
Yes, very
in
good
this
question.
election?
Very good question. So I'll give the shorter answer, although I have long, long answers on this question. The situation in Israel and Gaza is horrific and heartbreaking and awful, awful. And every day I make sure I spend, as I'm having breakfast, I make sure I open up my laptop and I read as much as I can that morning about what happened that night, the day before, how America's responding, what the messaging is coming out of the White House. And it's really an awful, awful tragedy. What happened on October 7th was most certainly a terrorist attack. I think of the women who suffered and the hostages, apparently, who continue to suffer sexual violence at the hands of Hamas, is gut-wrenching. It's sickening to think about. And then I think of the poor women of Gaza, who have no political power and now find themselves in the midst of a war with violence and destruction and awful weapons. And at the same time, we're seeing rises in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim attacks. And all of this is wrapped up in a tinderbox of a moment in world history and global geopolitical politics with other enemies of the United States and Israel, at a time during an American election that has great consequences for the points you make. And there's a generational divide, and I give the younger people a ton of credit. It has been the purview of young people, college students, for all time to call for peace and to call to the end of fighting. And I really respect that. I am troubled when it starts to bleed into things that I think can be perceived or are perceived and are sometimes anti-Semitic. But I think in general, the spirit of our young people asking difficult questions about where our money goes and what wars are funded is really important. So my position is a complicated one. It's not a singular thing. I want there to be peace. I want to have a Middle East that's stable. Israel is an important ally to our country. They provide military intelligence, they are an economic ally, and they're an old friend from their founding, and that matters. That means a lot. At the same time, Netanyahu is, in my opinion, an awful leader who was going to be in trouble for corruption, is right-wing. They're threatening to invade areas where refugees have been sent is very disturbing, and I was pleased to see the president speaking very harshly about that idea. I'm troubled by Netanyahu's discussion or sort of conversation about how he can't possibly see a two-state solution being in the cards. But I've also not called for a ceasefire one directionally with Israel, because I think it's a complicated problem and Israel has to be able to defend itself. So I want there to be peace. I want both sides to stop. I want the hostages to be released. And I want there to be a consistent and formidable plan for peace in the Middle East. And that is a complicated, complicated question. So at this point, I'm keeping my eye very closely on what the president's doing and saying in the next coming weeks. Same with Secretary of State Blinken. I can't pretend to think that as a freshman congresswoman, I'll be able to waltz in with one weird trick to save the Middle East. That's not going to happen. It's too complicated. The stakes are too high. But it breaks my heart. And to see starving children breaks my heart. And so I will deal with this issue. It's rapidly changing. And when I run and when I'm in Congress, I will do my best to educate myself on every perspective on this issue and to do my best with my moral compass and my commitment to America and our foreign policy to handle this issue in the best way I can from now until Election Day and beyond.
The only thing I would add to that is that if we elect Sue and re-elect Joe Biden, I'm not necessarily always going to be happy with every aspect of our foreign policy in the world.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about any specific issue. I've been part of 2 Democratic administrations as a foreign policy official. I used to write all of Bill Clinton's foreign policy speeches on every issue around the world. I've never been happy with any one of them 100%. But if we elect Sue, flip the House, re-elect Joe Biden, we are going to have leaders in Washington who are serious, who are adults, who care about saving lives, who try. And we are going to have a Congress that is willing to meet its most basic responsibilities to fund our national security so that we can do the things that are necessary to help people in Ukraine and Gaza and Israel and all over the world, and Haiti right now, who need help both in a humanitarian sense but also in a sense that is incredibly important to our national self-interest. That's what we need to keep in mind when it comes time to make these choices. And then when we elect them, we will hold them accountable. But at least they're going to be leaders who will listen to us.
Maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Maybe take those
So, gentleman right there, and then we'll keep going. Yeah.
Thank you. Tom, it's great to see you back in the district. I want to thank you for all the work that you did in our district through all those terms and the work you're doing with District of Democracy. One of my happiest days in Tom's second term was when we did get the Inflation Reduction Act enacted. It gave me a sense of real hope. I'm a formerly trained climate activist, and I've heard you get to speak, Sue, about climate change. First, thank you, too, for running, for the courage for doing it. There's another issue. I'm just curious whether it's on your radar screen. It's not particularly sexy, but it's something I view as a long-term ticking time bomb. That's the federal budget deficit. In 1980, it was the cumulative federal budget deficit was $1 trillion. Today, it's over 32 times that. It's about 50% larger than our economy. And it creates all sorts of issues, including national security issues, because an adversary, China, holds so much of our treasuries. I'm just curious whether you formed a view about the budget deficit, whether it's an important issue, whether it's something you talk about in the campaign trail, and that's something you want to address once you're in Congress. Thank you.
Yeah, there are competing theories on this, and I've studied both or all, a number of them. And it is something that comes up not very often on the campaign trail sometimes, and there are people who are particularly interested in it. And I think what I would say is that I am concerned about the debt held by other countries. I think that is a concern. However, I also don't want to see the balancing the budget to come down to working class families and the most needy among us. And what usually strikes me as a concern around this conversation is that then the way we want to fix the deficit is to cut things like benefits, cut things like health care, cut things like tuition help for students who are poor who go to college and other things like that. And so for me, the question isn't so much about how do we deal with the deficit, it's the rhetoric around balancing the deficit, which usually sacrifices the most vulnerable among us. And so I think I'd be much more interested in a conversation about spending and priorities, and also looking at the ways, especially like I look at New Jersey, the ways we can be smarter about the ways we spend money that doesn't cut the types of programs that I think people depend on. So I would say my mind is not quite made up from an economic standpoint on how the United States should handle its debt and how bad or good it is. But I am concerned about the rhetoric around cuts to things that affect the most vulnerable among us.
2 little factoids for you. the Inflation Reduction Act, as you know, more than paid for itself.
Yeah, that's true.
We spent a ton of money on climate, clean energy stuff, but we raised money by allowing Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices. Yay, that was a huge win. And by doing something that was really, you know, I hate to admit this because it was kind of a radical communist idea, but we decided that Amazon should pay taxes. Minimum corporate tax rate, right, which literally, like, I've not met a MAGA supporter in Hunterdon or Warren County who doesn't agree with that. And it was a totally partisan Democrat bill. And it more than paid for itself. In fact, it raised more money than it spent. The other big spending bill that we did when I was there was the infrastructure bill, which I love too. It did not pay for itself. You know why? Because it was bipartisan. And the price of having Republicans on that bill was they weren't willing to raise a penny of real revenue in order to pay for it. So, you know, they talk about it. We're the ones who are actually, like, responsibly trying to do something about it. And speaking of taxes, I'm not in office anymore. I can say whatever I want. But if the tax rates that existed during the 1990s, during the Clinton administration, had simply continued, we'd changed nothing. Most nonpartisan economists say that the deficit would be basically zero today. Now, as I recall, maybe I'm delusional, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think things were that bad in the 90s in terms of the American economy. I don't think we were suffering that much. I think it was, in fact, a time of economic boom. And Bill Clinton, the last president who balanced the budget, was a Democrat, right? So, yeah, I think it's important, but I think it's actually pretty clear who's got the better record on debt and deficit issues.
Let's
All
take
right.
one more question. My poor staff has been working for like 12 hours.
Oh,
and
I
want to
know,
send them
poor
home.
staff, okay. Back in the corner there.
I don't want them to quit on me.
I'll talk to them.
When you address the independents in the district, besides the inertia of the incumbent and the border, what is the issue that most persuades them?
Oh, such a good question. I would say it's the economy. I think people feel like Tom Kean is out of touch with their struggles, that the Republicans are very tone deaf. I mean, you saw Donald Trump say something about cutting Social Security and benefits, because you know he said the quiet part out loud. So I think it's the economy and the fact that Republicans are willing to roll the dice and play with their future plans and their ability to feed their families. And I would say that that's something that people are very sensitive to, particularly because Tom Kean is such a bad messenger on the economy, given his life of complete privilege, given the fact that he's been a lifelong politician. And they don't take kindly to a Congress that hasn't been able to accomplish much, if anything, in Tom Kean's time there.
I just want to say one thing before everyone leaves. You know this is our only swing district in New Jersey. So before you leave, sign up for Sue's campaign. Some of you are going to do that. I have to go to.
I'll amplify.
All right, then, can you hear me now?
Here comes Leslie.
Here we go, here comes the mic.
I just want to say, this is our only swing district. If we wanted to make sure that we take over the House, that goes through CD7. And I'm asking you all to sign up to help her campaign.
Yes.
All right? She needs the help. She needs all the volunteers here. So don't leave tonight. Why am I telling you this? Because we have one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, and principled candidates right here in CD.
Thank you, Marcia. And you can see my staff. Matt, can you wave? That's Matthew over there. If you want to sign up, you can go to SueAltman.com, and you can also see Matthew. And then Rob, where's Rob? Rob's in the back, direct back. He's my campaign manager. You can see one of or both of them if you want to talk to them.
Wait,
on your
but
way out.
before you
go-
sign up,
Yes.
I mean, look, I mean, I've got one more question that just has to be
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
answered, at least before I sign up. And I hate to, like, look, I'm always honest with you, Sue, okay? And I have to be honest in telling you that basketball is considered a minor sport in Congress and the congressional sports leagues.
So what's a major sport?
What position are you going to play on the congressional baseball team?
Oh my gosh. These are the issues that matter. Do you want a pinch hit for me? That might be kind of fun. I feel like shortstop, right? Scrappy. Were you a shortstop?
Yeah, I was the starting
Well,
shortstop.
then we'll do it together. You can teach me all your tricks.
All right.
Wait,
Good answer. All right, sign up.
Count on her because she's doing it for her.
Okay.
Tomorrow night to meet Sue, meet and greet for Sue, and the flyers outside. If you're interested, pick up and sign up.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.